When I was buying the Canon under to 300 f2.8 a few months ago, I was very indecisive. 12K is a lot of money, so I watched all the reviews I could find. They were not useful. Everyone talks about how sharp is this lens or how fast the autofocus is. Of course, the lens is sharp at that price. The real question was, is it gonna be a waste of money? Will this lens be good enough to justify that price? Will it be actually useful in the field? Now that I took it for several weeks of safari across Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana, I used it to photograph brown bears from heights in Slovenia, and I took it in the mountains when looking for ibex and deers. I have a much better idea of what this lens does, where it struggles, and whether or not it's worth the price. And I will save one major downside for the end, especially if you shoot video, that thing might actually change your mind. Let's start with how I used it. In Africa, I had it all the time mounted on the R5 and I paired it with the 600 f4 that was mounted on the R3. I figured I would use a 1.4 teleconverter most of the time on the under to 300, but I actually almost never used it. Between the relative freedom of movement allowed by the vehicle and how dynamic the sightings are, on a safari, you always have sightings happening at any distance, any place. This combo of under to 300 plus the 600 gave me full coverage from 100 millimeters to 600 with pro level sharpness and autofocus aperture all across the range. Of course, there is a gap between 300 and 600, but I can easily cover that or make up for that by slightly cropping the photos when I shoot at 300 millimeters instead of adding a teleconverter, or by moving the vehicle further away and use the 600. In Slovenia, the setting was completely different as I photographed brown bears from fixed heights, and in this case, the subjects and distances were more predictable, and I had previously worked from those same heights using a 70 to 200 that was often too short, the 600 that was way too long for that situation, and the 100 to 500 that was actually perfect for the focal length, but with an aperture of f7.1 at 500 millimeters, it was not bright enough for that shady forest, and I was forced to use crazy ISO all the time. So this time I used the under to 300 paired with a teleconverter, and the result is a 140 to 420 millimeters f4, which was just perfect for that situation in terms of focal length. And f4, yes, is not f2.8, but when paired with the low light capabilities of the R3, resulted in a very solid setup. As one should expect from such an expensive piece of gear, this lens delivers pro-level sharpness, wide open across the zoom range, edge to edge. I shoot it wide open 90% of the time because that's kind of the point when you spend so much money on a f2.8 lens. You want all the light, all the separation, all the bokeh, all this lens can deliver, you want it. Now, I know a lot of people worry about using teleconverters and losing sharpness and image quality. In my experience, the 1.4 times teleconverter performs very well here. In Slovenia, I used it all the time wide open at f4 and I didn't notice any quality issue. The image stays tack sharp across the frame and there is no noticeable drop in contrast or micro detail. Autofocus is also very fast and I didn't notice a difference in speed and reliability when compared with the 600 f4. And honestly, from a performance point of view, I don't have a single complaint about this lens. Now, what really surprised me is how this lens ended up replacing both my 70 to 200 and my 100 to 500 millimeters. Two lenses that I used all the time and I always brought with me. I would start the day with the 70-200 to take advantage of the f2.8 aperture in the low light. Then I switched to the 100-500 during the day as the sun came up, and after sunset back to 70-200 wide open at 2.8. Now with the 100-300, technically you lose a bit on both ends because you don't have the 70 millimeters wide and you don't get the 500 millimeters reach. But having just one lens with better sharpness, faster aperture, and better performance overall that stays consistent across the entire range, it's kind of game changer for me in the field. The bigger change is that constant f2.8 aperture. That extra stop of light might seem a detail, but when shooting mostly fast-moving subjects in low-light situations, this spec alone put this lens in a completely different league from something like the 100-500, which starts at 4.5, so more than one stop darker than this lens. I would even go as far as saying that this lens kinda replaces a 400mm f2.8 as well. With the 1.4 teleconverter, you're at 420mm f4, and the image quality still holds up quite well. Now, it's not a prime, it's not a true 400 f2.8, but for me, this is close enough in real world use, where it's not only about the pure performance, but also about practicality and flexibility. The result is a much simpler kit with fewer lens changes, fewer decisions to make in the field. Yes, it's expensive, but if I look at what it replaces, potentially 3 professional lenses worth a combined total of 19-20k euros, and how it simplifies my workflow without sacrificing image quality, the value of this lens starts to look like really strong. So, who this lens is really for? It's not for everyone. It's expensive, it's heavy. You will only benefit from it in very specific situations. If you are an experienced wildlife or sport photographer, someone who regularly shoots fast-moving subjects in low light, then yes, this lens is absolutely worth it. If you are a working pro but usually you shoot in well-lit conditions, in this case the RF 100-500 will save you a lot of money while still delivering excellent image quality and even more reach on the longer end. And if you're just getting started, this is not your lens, you will not need this at all. If your budget allows, the RF 100-500 is a fantastic all-rounder that will cover you for a lot of scenarios and situations. But honestly, even something like the RF 100-400 millimeters, which goes for around 600 euros, I guess, that will be very good to get you started. Or you can look for a used EF 100-400, the older version for the DSLRs. You get that one and an adapter. You spend a fraction of the original price and you get a very solid kit. The truth is, if you are a beginner, the biggest upgrade you can make is not on your gear, it's your experience. You will improve way more by spending time in the field than by throwing money at any new lens or camera or tripod. You don't need fancy gear to get started. The real growth happens when we spend full days together out in the field, shooting, learning, reviewing images, getting feedbacks in real time. So if you are serious about improving your photography, come join one of my workshops. We go way beyond camera settings. We work on how to see, how to react, how to build a powerful frame. It's the kind of hands-on experience that accelerates your learning way more than any lens or camera upgrade ever could. So feel free to check out my upcoming workshops calendar, link is down below. As promised, there is actually one real downside that caught me off guard, and it is handheld video stabilization. Compared with the 600 f4, I consistently noticed more shake when shooting handheld video with the 100 to 300, and that surprised me because the 100 to 300 is shorter and lighter, so in theory it should be easier to handle and stabilize. Even when using a beanbag, there was some weird shaking happening. Now, I tried to investigate a bit why this issue happens, and it might be a software issue between the R5, R3, and the optical image stabilization of the lens. Switching to stabilizer mode 2, which is meant for panning, partially solved the issue, but it's still there, is not a complete fix. Anyways, if you shoot mostly stills, it's a non-issue, but if handheld video is a regular part of your workflow, then it's something you want to be aware of. So for me, the Canon 100 to 300 reshaped how I pack and how I shoot in the field, but let's be real, it's not essential. And for most photographers, that extra money would be better spent on real-world experience, either workshops or just a trip, spending time in the field. That will give you better photography, not a new lens. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and if you've ever used the 100 to 300, I'd love to hear your impressions, and if you have any solutions for this video jitter problem. For today is all. It's time for me to go out and spend some time in the field myself, so I'll see you in the next video.